So, please connect. Okay, so we're connected. Are you ready? Okay. Whenever you want.
Awesome. Well, Alright. Well, thank you so much for allowing us to participate in the first of what I'm sure will be many rounds to be, demonstrated online and so forth. On behalf of Columbia, we are very excited to be able to do this. Now, the topic we'd like to discuss today is something that has been kind of blasting all over the headlines, given all this news about the debt crisis and so on and so forth. And on our side of the house, we're going to stand up here and argue that deficit reduction should be accompanied by revenue increases. And we're not going to mean something, kind of silly like tariffs or anything. What we mean very explicitly is that we ought increase taxes in order to compensate for this increased kind of budget surplus that we're trying to achieve, or rather narrowing the deficit, or whatever you have, or whatever kind of way you want to conceptualize it. So I have a couple of really short things I'd like to say about this. First is that we'd like to increase the nominal tax rate on millionaires and billionaires, more specifically people earning more than $1 million a year. And why is this true? Well, we tell you first of all that Milton Friedman has this thing called the permanent income hypothesis, where it tells you that people spend a fraction of their total wealth and not actually the amount of money they make in one particular year. Why is this important? It's important because, ladies and gentlemen, we tell you that even if you raise taxes on people who are incredibly wealthy, like Case Statement actually said, you won't actually affect their consumption levels writ large. Why is consumption important? Well, that's kind of what drives GDP. We tell you that GDP is the sum of all goods and services exchanged in a country within a given year. And the fact that very wealthy people who make over $1 million in 1 year won't have their consumption that negatively affected by this, we think is something that ought actually be taken into consideration. In sharp contrast, on the other hand, we tell you that the Bush tax cuts of the 2000s era actually increased the debt of the United States by more than 40%. More actually, ladies and gentlemen, than the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office's calculations would reveal, that it increased budget deficits and the budget debt more than each individual war in Afghanistan or Iraq, respectively. Not obviously the two of them combined, but taken one-on-one, these tax cuts actually contributed more to the budget increase, or the debt increase rather, than either of these wars. But additionally, we give you more pieces of analysis as to why it's important to actually go ahead and tax the rich. First of all, we tell you that if you're extremely wealthy, what's called your marginal propensity to consume actually goes down. So this means that because a lower percentage of kind of intangibles of your budget are spent on food, water, rent, etc., the wealthier you go up in the tax brackets, that means that the larger percentage of your money you're able to save. So let's put it in a very simple analogy. If I'm making $40,000 a year, I spend the vast majority of my income on things like rent and food and so forth, and I have very little left over to put into savings accounts. In sharp contrast, people who are very wealthy are able to fool around with their money and spend it on things like these complex derivatives that Credit Suisse has and these special accounts for people of high net worth individuals. What does this mean? It means that because these wealthy people are actually in such a position where they're saving a lot of their money, they're not spending the majority of the money that they make in a given year, so a lot of the money that they make isn't actually driving the economy at all. That's a bad thing. And why do we tell you this is important? Because, ladies and gentlemen, recognize that on a demographic standpoint, 1% of the American population controls 50% of the wealth. And this might sound like a big number because it means that a lot of people have a lot more, or a very small number of people have a lot more money. But when you take into account that these people aren't spending very much of their money, the fact that they're outnumbered more than 50 to 1 by other people in the middle class who do spend money on things like consumption that actually drive the economy is actually a very persuasive argument for our side. I think that's more than 90 seconds.
Yeah, that was really long.
Oh dear.
Maybe you should just say the third argument, honestly.
Okay, yeah.
I think the third is most understandable to the hoi polloi.
The hoi polloi, okay.
So Reed,
should we start over?
Yeah, I think we should start over. Okay, so Reed, we're going to start over in case you didn't get that. Okay.
Cool.
So
all right, awesome.
Just let it run.
Great. Well, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. What we'd really like to stand up here and argue is that given all the contentious rhetoric flying back and forth about the debt ceiling debate, on our side of the house, we would propose that we should actually raise taxes on wealthy individuals and not simply reduce deficits and thereby the debt through simply spending cuts. And what do I mean by this? And why is this a policy proposal that you ought to be persuaded by? So there's a couple of reasons. First of all, what we tell you is that in America, the top 1% of wealthy individuals control 50% of our nation's wealth. Why is this important? On one level, it sounds like, okay, because there are a lot of wealthy people walking around, doesn't it make sense that all that money should be incentivized to be actually spent? Yes and no. The no part is what's most important. What we tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that these people have a lower what's called marginal propensity to consume. Because if you're extremely wealthy, then you actually don't have to go ahead and spend all your money on like intangibles, like rent, food, etc. Which means that the fact that there's only 1% of people who have this wealth means that there's so many more people in the economy who actually take a majority of their income and spend it on other things. 90 seconds, okay. And this is important for a number of reasons. Because we tell you that insofar as like consumption is a driver of GDP, because we know that GDP is the sum of all goods and services exchanged in an economy, it's actually much more economically beneficial for the middle class and lower classes to be able to spend a much higher percentage of their income, rather than actually soaking the rich and doing this kind of voodoo, really kind of disproven, debunked economic hypotheses of the 80s that say that you just ought to soak the rich and have them drive consumption. We tell you this doesn't work empirically, it's not a smart idea, it doesn't make analytic sense, and our idea is much more preferable. Okay, cool. That's
Okay,
about
thanks,
90
Alex.
seconds.
Alright, that's fine.
No worries.
You don't care. Do you care about the blip in the middle?
No, not really.
Okay.
But maybe you might if if this comes down to
Alright, well, let's do Reed's response, and then at the end we can decide if we want to do that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe Reed will come across as more constructive, and I can just respond to him, and we can just cut out the first one. So, I don't
That's
know.
true. That's true.
Yeah.
Alright.
We'll play by ear.
Reed, you want to go? Let's see
Okay, yeah. I'm going to put the phone on mute and speaker, and I'm going to start playing when I start talking, okay?
Okay.
Cool. You should be able to hear me. I have no idea how you would evidence that you can't hear me, but yeah, I'm going to presume you hopefully can.
Facebook's not working. What? Oh.
Great. So I'm here to argue against the idea that we ought to try to solve our current deficit problems using the mechanism of tax increases. And I'm really excited about that because it's actually a really easy thing to argue for. So there's one big reason why we shouldn't be willing to turn to increasing revenues in order to solve deficit problems, which is that fundamentally that takes money out of the economy, which we actually use to generate growth. Now, we totally heard from Alex a bunch of important arguments that why rich people are far less likely to spend money. But bear in mind that a lot of people who seem from a tax perspective to have a lot of money are actually people who say own small businesses, people who make a lot of money each year and also spend a great deal of it maintaining the business they personally own. These are exactly the sort of people who need to be doing things like